Lake Needlebush, one of the many subsidiary lakes to the Amadeus Basin, the water system that extends 500 kilometres across the centre of Australia. It's 7 a.m. and freezing, but a team of Queensland scientists and Earthwatch volunteers from around the world still have to venture into the icy lake to take water and soil samples in a bid to unravel the Salt Lake history. Linda, why do you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and come out where it's -5 degrees and get your feet wet?
It's a change of pace from my work at home.
I always wanted to come down to Australia, and I thought this would be a kind of an interesting way to see the country and meet some people.
But you've got to be crazy to go out there in the mud, in the cold.
Somewhat. But it gives you something to laugh about later.
What's been the most interesting thing about coming to Australia for this particular type of trip?
You mean as part of an Earthwatch group?
Yeah.
The most interesting part? Seeing the country and going out every day and rocking and rolling along the roads. And, being with interesting people.
I guess it's the excitement of seeing the lakes when they've been the fullest in European history and treading on ground that not many white people have tread on before.
After the uncharacteristic heavy rains in recent months, many of the lakes here are full, and their remote location has left them largely untouched. It's the perfect working environment for scientists trying to understand how salt lakes are formed. This trip is part of the ongoing analysis of Central Australian salt lakes, which began more than 7 years ago. Out here in Australia's heart, the team gathers data about the types of salts that have built up, as well as how concentrated they are and where they are distributed. Much of the group's study has centred on lakes like this one, which have had no farming or agriculture, perhaps no human contact at all. But as you can see, it's still affected by scalding and salination, in much the same way as some highly agricultural areas are. For geologists here, it's important to understand what has happened to the soil before now, its history, if you like. The salinisation research is led by Dr. Arrow Arakel from the Queensland University of Technology. In the field, his group takes water samples from above and below the ground, testing its acidity and its conductivity. It's also important to take soil samples because they too tell the story, not just of how the lakes have been formed, but of how they've changed over the years. Most of the soil testing takes place back in the lab, but sometimes even the most basic tests are enough. The information gathered is still to be analysed in detail, but so far it indicates that salinisation has occurred throughout geological time, evidenced by the presence of evaporites, mineral salts that form from the evaporation of water. This indicates that the land was saline even before the lakes were formed. The team has discovered that water below the ground is coming up through the soil, dissolving the salts in the soil, which are then deposited on the surface as the land becomes degraded. Dr. Arakel hopes this research will help land managers devise strategies for controlling land degradation. Well, how significant is that finding?
Well, it's significant in that sense that it gives us some idea about the natural processes which have occurred through geological time. In other words, there are a number of processes which are man-induced, and there are also other processes which are naturally occurring. They're inherited processes, or problems, I should say. And I think it's important to isolate the man-induced ones and inherited or natural process from each other before we think about the cure to the problem.
Collecting data for this type of research is a long and tedious process, but everything in this sparse environment holds important information. It's hard to imagine that this land holds the key to solving the soil and degradation problems of the Victorian Mallee and other pastoral districts thousands of kilometres away. But that's why these people are here. They leave no stone unturned in their quest to discover the Salt Lake's secret. In fact, they collect stones and rocks and analyse them.
I'm here to look at the rocks and see what sort of influence the rocks have on the distribution of the salt lakes, basically, and We can look at the chemistry of the rocks in terms of what's precipitating in the waters. That's my basic interest in the area.
There are several possible causes of the build-up of salts. Maybe, as has been indicated by this research, old salt solutions are released from the soil, or perhaps it's caused by the chemical breakdown of rocks, or even a combination of the two. Once the cause and the exact chemistry of the salts are known, researchers will be able to define just how much of the salinisation problem was influenced by people and how much is natural. Along the way, the team has made all sorts of other discoveries. In some of the lakes, they've found high levels of magnesium sulfate and sodium sulfate, which Australia imports at the moment at high prices.
The minerals here, they're so abundant that we can, as we have done since we've been on the trip, simply take samples of the brine and leave them to sit in the sun for a day and then bring them inside, and within 24 hours huge crystals will start forming, and you've seen some of those in the beaker. And they have a very high purity, and if you can get enough of them and if you can transport them to where they're needed for a reasonable price, then there's a very good commercial potential there.
The Salt Lake mystery is far from being solved. Slowly but surely, scientists are moving closer to finding an answer to our environmental problems. But there's still a lot of ground to cover, quite literally.